And our speaker today is Ciaran Talbot, who's from the University of Manchester, where he's the Director for AI and Ideas Adoption, which the minute I saw it, I thought was a fantastic title. What that involves isn't just AI, but it's AI as the context for thinking about systems and digital developments in support of the library's vision. And he works across all parts of the library, leading change, thinking about different ways of working, and translating ideas into impact, so that the whole of this development in the context of AI is really with students at the heart of it. So welcome, Ciaran, and we're all looking forward to hearing your talk.
Great, thank you, Katie. So, yeah, hi everybody. My name's Ciaran, and as that kind of intro delivered, I work at the University of Manchester, and I've worked there since 2009, but in the library since 2011, so a fair old time. And I work in, as many of you do, the interesting kind of intersection between digital and library. And when I reflect back to think how I ended up here, it's probably because when I first had my Commodore Amiga 600 in about 1991, I studiously catalogued all the games, because I was really annoyed that my brother never put them back in the right order. So I got into cataloguing quite early. Right. So yeah, I'm going to set some context, hopefully inspire a bit of provocation and discussion for our Q&A. Let's go back in time. So unbelievably, we are a quarter of a century into the 21st century. So I sort of glanced back at about the time that I got my first mobile phone. This is actually, I found this at the weekend. This is my Philips Savvy. But at the same time, Tim Berners-Lee was writing about his vision, his ideas about the World Wide Web. And it's utopian, it's lovely, it's a big world of information that anyone can access. I think we've come a long way in that 25 years, both in terms of information and technology. So what have we been up to? Well, we've been busy over the past quarter century. We live at a time where people are kind of getting vaccinated against their own diseases. Over in America, the self-driving taxis have covered over 25 million miles as of last December, which is pretty mad. Up in Scotland, laboratory samples are being delivered by drone. So we've been busy building, creating new technology. We've also been very busy creating, copying, moving around information, vast swathes of the stuff. So this year, 2025, we're predicted to create, copy, consume 182 zettabytes, which is a trillion gigabytes, so that's one with 12 zeros. So it's a lot of information for us to navigate. And it's a challenging world out there in the information space. So in the kind of media space, you're probably well aware of the declining kind of revenues and what that means around the way that we access news and get quality information. And if you, like me, often looking for interesting information, you hit wall after wall after wall, and there's a real kind of disequity, and it often costs a lot of money to access good quality information. And we know that in the research library space, because we spend a lot of time negotiating and paying for high quality research information. So we are also beset with such things as disinformation, people bringing their own facts. None of this is new. This is the good people of Medicine Lodge writing in their Crusette, lamenting the people of Sun City and their news outlet, and accusing them of spreading disinformation. So it's been knocking about for a long time. I'm sure when we were drawing on cave walls, we were exaggerating the size of the saber-toothed tigers and that kind of thing. But it's increasingly difficult, I think, to find kind of good quality information. And of course, the way that we are finding, discovering, ingesting that information is changing, and the people that are coming into our spaces, so students and researchers, are using different mediums to sort of deal with this fire hose of information. So this just shows how young people are finding their news in the UK and in America. So it's a changing and it's a very kind of interesting landscape. And that kind of feeling of inequity and the fact that you've probably got to pay and have some skills to be able to find good information, because the bad stuff is often free. What does that mean? So what does that mean for the research library? So over the past quarter century, technology has developed, information has exploded, and we're trying to play that role in helping people discover high quality information in it sort of coming from a space of integrity. And my contention is that actually we do that very well. We provide skills, we try and support people to navigate this landscape. But now I'm going to flood the zone. So AI is also quite good at helping you upskill your PowerPoint presentations. So, what I'm saying here is that the situation has changed and is changing, and we are now in this space where we have got these new, fresh tensions that are influencing the way that we help people to discover and find information. So what I want to explore a little bit is what that means for the research library, what that means for people. And some of those tensions are we're dealing with now, and then some are more iceberg kind of on the horizon. So this, I actually borrowed this graph from last year's RLUK. This is some research that Wiley did with Ohio Link, so that's a group of libraries in Ohio, and it was looking at how people discover information, and it really shows that we're not in that space anymore where we are choosing the books in the shelves that line our walls. People discover information how they discover information, and what we do as libraries is try and give people the skills and the tools to be able to take that journey, whether that's through critical thinking or sort of search and discovery, helping them with their literature reviews. But new on the scene, like we said, AI is here, and one of the shifts that we're starting to see is the move to Gen AI as search is how I've put it. So generative AI, so this is the technology, this is the large language models that you've heard so much about, and I've just kind of illustrated there. I don't know what this picture looks like, but I think it's going to change over the next few years. I've picked up that there's some prediction that this year, 2025, ChatGPT might take 1% of Google's kind of traffic, which, only 1%, but that's 1% of a massive number. It's still a big number. So there's potential here for disruption. ErnieBot, by the way, that is from Baidu, so that's a Chinese app. We'll come back to that one. And I've put Copilot in there as well. I don't know how many students are using that. Actually, I do. We'll come back to that. But the bet here is big because Google, Microsoft, and the other kind of big tech have put so much money into this, they need to make it work. And so one of the big kind of opportunities that I suppose they're seeing is in that search space. Google has been kind of promoting, thinking about this, pushing this for the past year, 18 months. You've probably seen this. I mean, this is the same tool you'll probably remember. It was advising people to put glue on their pizzas to keep the topping on and also eat rocks. It's improved since then. But the potential here is that they want to make the flip from Google being a search engine to being an answer engine. The idea then that everything sort of comes through this one interface, and it kind of breaks and disrupts that model where you get presented with that list of links and you go through and you interrogate those sources. What they'd rather happen is it's all presented to you in that interface. And I think what we don't know is how that's going to be kind of commercialized and what that means for our sort of our students and researchers. Yes, you'll have seen, if you've used Google in the past year, you'll have seen these AI summaries appear. You might scroll quickly through them, or you might find them useful. And interestingly, ChatGPT are trying to go down that same route, so they've got a search option as well, which is the web search option. So we're kind of getting this pushed in our direction. And we're seeing that obviously in the academic research space as well. So scholarly search. So we're testing the Primo Research Assistant. So it's becoming pervasive. as a potential kind of method for navigating this information space. So what does that mean for us? Well, what we don't know yet is necessarily how it's going to be commercialized. Okay, yes, you can pay for a ChatGPT license, but a lot of people are going to be using the free version. And what does that mean? Often if you're not paying for something, if you're not paying for the product, then you potentially are the product. And if our students, for example, are using ChatGPT and they're trying to work out how to make it make money, then we could see things like this where the information becomes sponsored or it's offering to kind of buy things for you. And what does that mean? It might just mean more Deliveroo's turning up with pizza at the library at 8 p.m. I don't know, but I think we just need to be aware of the influence the commercialization will have on people's ability to find quality, trusted information. Yes, and what does that mean for us? So something we're thinking about a bit is I think we need a little bit more thought into how we test. So when these tools are coming in our direction, whether that's the ones you access, Google, ChatGPT, or whether it's the scholarly ones that you are sort of engaging with vendors about, I think we need to perhaps come up with some frameworks so that we are asking appropriate questions about how they work, how they're gathering their information. I think there's also a question about thinking about what we perhaps lose if we are delegating some of our sort of cognitive work to these tools. And what that means is doing a literature search useful for developing your skills, or is it fine just to click a button and for something to do it for you? In the medium term, one thing I do think about is this, or worry about, whether there's going to be a flattening of creativity. So there's this theory that if you're setting up a cool, trendy coffee shop, you might search for cool, trendy coffee shops, and you'll find lots of pictures on Instagram of cool, trendy coffee shops. And then when you create your cool, trendy coffee shop, it looks the same as all the others. And because these large language models are trained on this corpora, and I think about whether you can get those leaps of imagination, and whether that's still our role as humans. And I think, we need to watch out for that flip if generative AI does become the sort of prevalent method for discovery and search. And then long term, I'm really interested in what it means for how we research, how we study, what our sort of creative outputs are. Is it a tool that's going to improve that, or is it going to have the opposite effect? Okay. Right, yeah, we're going big. Geopolitics. So Nick Clegg is formerly of this parish. He was the VP at Meta, brackets Facebook, for I think about 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And he left earlier this year. And in his leaving tweet, because that's how you leave, he wrote about saying that he hoped he had played some role in seeking to bridge the very different worlds of tech and politics, and that they did continue to interact in an unpredictable way, which I think is the understatement of certainly this year, if not the century. And it feels like at the moment, well, certainly from what we've sort of seen from the past few years, is that this kind of technopolitics has become, if you've sort of encountered the triple helix idea of kind of innovation, where you've got the state, you've got business, and you've got education, you've got us lot. And it feels like the sort of tango between state, government, and business at the moment. There's a real power play, and we feel a little bit at kind of arm's length, kind of watching this dance. Okay, but what does that mean for us? So this I just pulled together, some information. Hopefully it's quality and trustworthy. But this is just looking at how much some of the big seven, some of the big technology companies are investing in their AI infrastructure just in 2025. So this is mainly sort of the data centers. So these are the data centers that we are pumping information, water, energy into. But I just wanted to kind of indicate that disparity between the amount of money flowing in from the big technology companies, which is sort of 400 billion plus just this year, And then at the AI summit that you'll have seen last month, the EU announced, I think it was 51 billion over sort of 4 or 5 years, and that was just their sort of seed funding. But who's got the power here? I mean, we've seen over the past sort of quarter century the sort of impact that social media has had on the way people get information, potentially kind of people's mental health, and I think sort of states' inability to shape and sort of make that kind of put the parameters around that, the policy around that. And I look at this and see how much money is going in, and the investment demands a return. They need to find a way to make money from us. And so how much influence is government really going to have over that? But it works both ways. So you might have used DeepSeek. So DeepSeek is a generative AI model developed in China. And it works great for the most part, unless you are researching sort of political history, say in China, in which case you'll get something where it's sort of like, nah, let's talk about something else. Don't really fancy that. So you might think, well, that's not a problem. Who's using DeepSeek to do their research? So this is some data I grabbed. So this shows the generative AI tools that are being used across our network over the past 30 days. And you can see DeepSeek is there at number 5. ChatGPT is up there. Top of the list is Baidu. So this is a Chinese tool, which I've not really been able to interrogate because the interface is Chinese. But I think what this shows is, I think we need to be aware of what our students and our researchers are using and start to, I know we are already, but making sure they're aware of the sort of the constraints, the biases that are built in. And it's not just, I'm not, having a go at China. I mean, yeah, who's using X's Grok for their research? Not many people, I imagine. They're trying to make it based. I had to Google this. So based is basically being, presenting a viewpoint in a very unapologetic way from a political standpoint. So that might be fine, but we do know that people are using ChatGPT for their studies, for their discovery, for their research. And at the moment, it'll give you a pretty rounded sort of Wikipedia-style answer. But if, for example, say OpenAI, who are the makers of ChatGPT, say they want to open new data centers, they want to attract new funding, they want access to lots of information, and the US state goes, yeah, that's cool, but we'd like you to maybe tweak things a little bit. We're not happy with the output. And all of a sudden, you've got a tool that millions of people are using, but it could be pumping out problematic information. And yeah, Jan 6 was just good vibes, strong opinions, and just an unorthodox approach to sightseeing. So this, I just think we need to be very aware of what could happen, and making sure that we make our users aware as these things do, I think, probably start to happen. And then, of course, sadly, we're also seeing actual good quality research kind of pulled, and this information is the stuff that kind of feeds these language models. So again, if sort of the fuel that's going in is being limited because it's, doesn't align with people's ideas and ideologies, then I think that has an impact on what we can kind of usefully get out of them as tools. Okay. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that it's a very interesting tango between big technology and states. And I think interesting when our own government back in January said they wanted to mainline AI into the country. I don't know why reference to hard drugs is appropriate with AI, but how realistic is that? How much power have we actually got? Especially as an EU Commission report said that 80% of the technology and the services that we need, well, we used to need when we were in the EU, but the EU need for digital transformation is from outside. So it's reliant on American and on a sort of Eastern technology. So how much influence do we actually have? And the over-reliance, so that if big decisions are made, we have that kind of rug pull where suddenly everything changes and we don't really have the ability to respond. I think it's one of the good things about generative AI is that it reminds us how no technology is neutral. Everything has got a bias, but it's quite helpful just to see how obvious it can be and remind us that even the layout on our keyboard is there for a reason, and will influence the way that we kind of consume and deliver information. And I do think there's going to be increasing kind of pressures on the values. So those, I think one of the great things about libraries is that we do kind of have strong values, and we try and sort of frame what we do against those. But we're also in a world where a lot of the big technology companies that we rely on, your Amazons, your Microsofts, are, for example, quietly dropping their environmental sustainability goals. But we are reliant on them. Whether we realize it or not, technology is going to become increasingly kind of intertwined and integrated, and it'll be difficult and challenging to do what we want to do without relying on technology that maybe doesn't sort of closely align with our own values. And your Elons could buy Blue Sky one idle Tuesday for a laugh, and then where do we go? So I think we're in a really interesting space. On the plus side, there's opportunity to do stuff that's now been cancelled in other parts of the world. Every cloud. Yes, generative AI. So the large language models, we're well aware that the fuel that feeds them is good quality information. This is just a quote I grabbed from Mustafa Suleyman. He's the CEO of AI at Microsoft, and he wrote The Coming Wave a couple of years ago, which is sort of about the incoming wave of AI. But this kind of points at the fact that the technology vendors, they know the quality of the information that the institutions that we are attached to, that we work with, are putting out there. And interestingly, from this quote, you can see willing to pay for it, but they're not paying the libraries, they're not paying the universities in that dynamic. So I think there's an interesting conversation to be had around what do we want to do with our current research collections. So the articles that our colleagues are putting out there, sort of the preprints, and the sort of the open science, so all that kind of the data, the code, the inputs, the outputs that are coming with that research, that sort of modern research collection. If we want to do interesting things with it, so sort of imagine it's kind of the shop window on your institution's kind of leading edge research, and we might want to interrogate that in interesting ways to show, to discover where kind of interdisciplinary research could take place, or gaps in our research. And to do that, we may need to partner with technology. But the technology vendors who are developing the LLMs certainly are looking probably to publishers for this information. And I think there's how far are we going to lean into our rights retention is perhaps something we can think about. And then the other thing is just, I think we need to be cognizant as research libraries how AI is kind of diffusing into a lot of the processes that go along with research. So I've read a little bit around this idea of continuous peer review, which sounds quite interesting and appealing. So the idea is research it's in the background automatically being reviewed for corrections and to find connections with other research. So there's some really powerful stuff that I think we need to be thinking about experimenting with. And the other bit that I'm quite interested in, so this is actually a photo of the basement at Rylands. And I was down there with a colleague the other week, and we found a box of handwritten lyrics by Mark E. Smith of The Fall, which is quite cool. And I thought, I'm sure we'd have people who'd be interested in kind of researching and looking at that. I checked on our catalogue, and you wouldn't know it's there. It's not been, it's not been described. There's no metadata. So I think there's definitely a lot of space, and I know colleagues here are looking at that and thinking about that, of speeding up the process of making discoverable all of this incredible human-created content, and not just to feed other people's platforms, but just to make them available. And I think one of the other things we'll see probably in the next 10, 20 years is the robotics coming into this space. At the moment, looking at the kind of the videos that you see of robots sort of falling over, you perhaps wouldn't want to trust it with your ancient manuscripts, but it will develop, and it will bring interesting questions to sort of our role and position as libraries. Okay, so I'm going to maybe project a little bit into the future here. Like I said, AI, it's got to find its profit, it's got to find a way to make money. I don't think OpenAI has made no one's really made a dollar out of this stuff. All the money is going in, but no one's worked out how it's going to pay for itself yet. But one of the kind of trends or things that I've been looking at and thinking about a bit is what's going to happen with the commodification of AI as it kind of augments what we do. So we're seeing students and researchers. We saw from that graph, we know people are using these different tools for their studies and for their research. And I'm also seeing it in the workspace. I've got a colleague, some of you might know him, Scott Taylor, and he's been on the AI train early doors, so pre sort of November 2022. And I said, what does it feel like? What are you doing with your team? And he said, it's basically like I've 10x'd myself. So what he means there is his ability to operate and to do things that he could not do have been vastly increased. And what he's been able to do with his team is create some applications which are now kind of doing sort of fairly advanced citation analysis. And it's an interesting proposition because he is not a computer programmer, neither are his team. But they are now essentially coding, and they are creating these new tools. And I have to say, I'm lucky to have a development team, having to catch up with him. They are sort of getting out quite far ahead of perhaps their understanding. And the challenge on us now is to try and make the space for them to be able to work. I'm keen to encourage them to do this kind of work, but they perhaps aren't always thinking about data security, data integrity. And if you have never coded before, how do you trust what you've asked the machine to do is going to give you output that you can then trust and that you can then perhaps display to your research community or whoever's kind of asked for this information? So it's an interesting shift. There's been quite a lot in the press about it called, vibe coding. The notion is that you can just talk to your computer and say, hey, look, can you give me like a Pac-Man game, but replace the ghosts with kittens, and it will give you a fairly good approximation. And so we will see this, I'm seeing this with my colleagues, coming into the workspace. And I think we need to think about what that means. What kind of do we need to kind of wrap around that? In real life, we're seeing chatbots used as sort of critical friends and companions. I've even heard of some people kind of using them as therapists, which I think is really interesting. So they're sort of becoming this quite powerful augmentation, which many people are sort of using, maybe not always critically thinking about how they're using them. So the potential kind of direction of travel is that these things are going to become more powerful. So at the moment, you can ask, I could ask a ChatGPT, hey, look, I'm going to Liverpool for a long weekend. Give me some nice cultural things to do, a nice place to go for a run, suggest some vegetarian restaurants, and it will give me a nice itinerary. With agentic AI, I could then go, okay, great. Can you book me the train tickets, book me the hotel, text my friends who live near Liverpool, and it will go off and do that. Again, very powerful for those people who can afford it and those people who can use it. So that, I think that's coming, that's interesting. And also these tools are going to be a lot better than they are at the moment in knowing who you are, so they can plug into your calendar, your email. They'll know how you move about. Again, quite scary, but also potentially quite powerful. And we'll also see a sort of diffusion of conversational AI into existing mediums. So if you've ever used your Google Assistant, your Siri, your Alexa, at the moment they feel a bit naff. I can get the weather, I can set a timer, but I can't have that same interaction that you can have with kind of ChatGPT. So what they're all working on in the background is bringing the generative AI into those platforms. So all of a sudden, millions of homes are going to have essentially these quite powerful assistants. Yeah, like this, but virtual. However, just to sort of, I just want to briefly divert. I played with this thing called the R1, which is sort of an agent that can interact with websites.
Hey, Rabbit. So can you send a message on the platform Blue Sky using teach mode? So that's quite important. Remember, we did learn this, so it's using teach mode. And send the message saying, hello to the LMG AI group.
So this makes me less worried about the robots that are coming.
The future is not fast. Okay, well, that looks promising.
Yes, it's... Eventually.
It did it. It did it twice, but,
So, yeah, I'm not trusting this thing to renegotiate my mortgage just yet. But you get a flavour of the direction of travel.
Hello, Ciaran. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here. I'm so excited to chat with you and make your day brighter. How are you today?
Great.
Welcome, Ciaran. Thrilled to have you back. You're in for a treat because I'll give you a uniquely tailored and warm experience.
No, I
that's
did.
Beyond
I actually.
compare. Catching
I
up
said,
with you is
be extra nice to
always a
me.
highlight. What's on your mind today?
Anyway, what I'm getting at is these things, they're going to become more compelling, more personable. They are going to be in your ear, or your glasses, as they are at the moment. And for sort of the people who can use them, and again, I'm talking about researchers and students, it's going to be incredibly powerful.
Well, hello.
Yeah, we got the point. But then who do you trust? Do you trust the expert, the librarian, the person in the room, or do you trust the technology, the computer? And I see this with when my partner, she wakes up, she'll go, oh, I slept great. And I go, oh, cool, okay, cool. And she says, yeah, I got a sleep score of 86. It said I got this much REM, I got this much deep sleep. And I say, well, hold on. Shouldn't you just ask yourself how you feel about, don't let the tech tell you how you slept. So I think there's a thing there around, our skills as librarians and people trusting these things so much that it puts us into an interesting kind of dilemma. And what skills are still foundational as a student, as a researcher, as a librarian? Yeah, apologies for this. I searched for a librarian on open media, and it's a bit talk of technology bias. So yeah, we need to think about what our kind of foundational skills as library folk are. A piece of Microsoft research from last week was sort of showing how the over-reliance, it kind of removes you, if you stop doing the doing, and you're just kind of orchestrating a bunch of kind of AI agents, but then you do need to step in when something goes wrong. But if you're not practicing that, flexing that kind of skill, that muscle every day, then your ability diminishes potentially, as it said here. And I think the bottom line is we need to ensure we maintain the joy and the satisfaction in our roles, because we want to come to work and have a good time amongst the challenges. So yeah, we've covered some various bits and bobs. There's some conclusions there, but I know I'm up against time, so I'll just finish with.
Thank you for listening to the embodied version of me for this talk about trust, integrity, and the library in a world increasingly infused with artificial intelligence. I or he will now hand to Katie for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciaran and Ciaran. and I was about to put up the stop sign, and then he started talking about joy, so I felt completely flummoxed. But thank you for covering so much in such a kind of whistle-stop tour of all the thinking you're doing. We've got time for questions now. There are roving microphones. If anybody has a question, put your hand up. With apologies for not knowing everybody's names yet, because it's only day 2, I will just point at people. So over there to start with.
Hi, Bruce Hedrick from JSTOR. Enjoyed that talk, Ciaran. Thank you very much. I will say I have one point and then one question. In looking at JSTOR's usage for 2024, we did see Google referrals drop considerably. And to your point of what you were making, I think it'd be interesting for libraries to look at their usage to see if they're seeing those referral drops, because it's our contention that the LLMs, the ChatGPTs are taking that away as people are using the overviews and not going to the actually referenced articles. My question is, at least in the States, we've seen institutions start to choose their large language models at the enterprise level. So institutions do a deal with OpenAI or do a deal with Anthropic, and that permeates down through the enterprise. The library has to use that or needs to use this, is supposed to use that. And my question really was, when I started my development life in the early 80s, institutions were really segmented by the hardware they used. You were either an IBM shop, or you were an HP shop, or you were a DEC shop. Do you see this potentially going back to this, where institutions are really become really segmented shops based on what they've chosen as their Gen AI threshold there?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's an interesting one. So I think at Manchester we are a Microsoft shop essentially at the moment. So I think we've definitely had conversations about Copilot, and I think probably if you are a Google enterprise, you might be having similar conversations with Google. Yeah, I mean, I think that's another tension, because I suppose one of the things that came up yesterday is we should be, we are custodians of our collections and our metadata and kind of all the effort that goes in there. And those collections are quite tightly intertwined, I think, probably with the platforms that we use, whichever management systems we use. But we should be thinking about if we wanted to kind of move between platforms. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, if Microsoft offered us some bundled deal, then I think we would go down that route. But I wonder if, as well, depending on the direction these different tools take, whether it would get to a point where students might factor in, they're using that, or I get access to that and I get an iPad or whatever. That could be a direction of travel.
Thank you. Another one over here.
Thanks. I'm Jeremy Upton, University of Edinburgh. Thanks, Ciaran. Obviously, huge amount to take in and think about there, so thank you for that. My basic question is around about the search, and I'm kind of just being careful to think that I'm not just old school, thinking that about the way that traditionally we've done searching. But your point about AI beginning to take over as the approach to searching, do you think it is, or are there still going to be differentials? I've heard that Google searching is for something different. Will we still see that, or will AI completely take over and become just the default for searching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess part of it will come down to how effectively Google is able to kind of commercialize it. Because at the moment, if you're searching for trainers or shoes or something, you get the sponsored links because they've been, your shoe vendor has paid to push it up the list. So I think what we don't know is if they want to become more of an answer interface where it's just pervasive, it's always there, perhaps it's, it's in your ear, you're talking to it. How kind of does that model work for payment? And then what that means for if you're searching for, to do your essay. I think, I don't know. I think, I can't see the keyword format sort of disappearing. I feel like it's going to be an option. Yeah. What do you think?
And I feel like if you knew how to commercialize all this AI investment, you wouldn't be working in a research library.
Yeah.
You'd have been poached by any number of the tech companies,
Yeah.
right? Because they don't know either
Yeah.
at the moment. Any more questions, particularly this side of the room? We've got one over here, and then we'll go over to my left.
Hi, I'm Michelle O'Hara from the University of Glasgow. I was just wondering how the sort of almost human interface, if you like, of or conversational style of the sort of chatbots are essentially, they make people forget, if you like, that they're actually talking to a machine and that it is just the sort of prediction model, if you like, or a tool. And I wondered what that meant for people being able to evaluate if they think they're talking to an expert in the field, perhaps, rather than a machine, if you like, that perhaps will give them false information or incorrect terms.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a good space for the library to step into when we're sort of teaching those academic skills and helping people to use the tools effectively. I think we could probably do a lot to kind of neutralize the language, because I know I'm guilty of it. I'll say, oh yeah, it's going to enable this, oh, supercharge that. But actually it's just, you know, I don't say that about Microsoft Word particularly, but it is just a computer program. And I think we can probably do quite a bit in that space. Katie, you've got a good...
It's just applied statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really, but that's something I picked from Doug Gore. It's not my innovation, but I love that way of just demystifying it a bit.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go... There was a hand over here. There's the microphone. I just got to look for where the microphone is. Over to you.
Hi, Simon Baines, University of Aberdeen. Thanks, Ciaran. Really entertaining talk. Thank you. I've got quite a specific question. You had a short reference to what your colleague Scott Taylor's doing with citation data. I would really like a tool that I was able to just say, tell us how to fix the fact that our citation data is causing us to slip down the league tables. So I'd be interested to know what Scott's doing, or if there's anything he's blogged about, or if there's anything we can see that would help us see what you're doing and learn from it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Good shout. I will speak to Scott. I mean, Scott Taylor, he's head of open research at the library at the University of Manchester. He's got kind of he's quite a passionate interest in this, and he has been using some of the generative tools for a long time. But he's worked specifically with a sort of subset of his team to build some of this kind of experimentation, I would say, around pulling together previously unconnected sources of information around citation and sort of metrics. And one of the things I do think about in relation to that is it speaks to, there's some theories that say the way kind of businesses and organizations are going to kind of head is that you'll keep kind of that human leadership layer, but there'll be some kind of hollowing out of that middle bit, because potentially you could bring in fairly junior staff, give them access to the tools, and then they're operating at a higher level. I mean, it's a bit. It's then, well, what happens to all those, mid-career people who with a lot of skills that they've learned and built up over the past sort of 10, 20 years? But I've sort of almost seen it in the way that he's building his team. He's sort of, I was going to say it, supercharging his some of his more junior staff in a really interesting way. So I think it's going to, that in and of itself is going to pose challenges to, as we do our kind of workforce planning and that kind of thing. Because you want to, I don't want to, I'm trying to center the human in this, and I don't want to, go down that kind of replacing route. But yeah, on your point, I'll speak to Scott and see if we can do some sharing. Yeah.
There's something really interesting about that whole area of citation analysis anyway, because there's a piece out yesterday. OUP have seen a similar drop in traffic that our colleague from JSTOR was saying, and they're worried about how it will impact on the visibility of the original scholarly publications as opposed to the summaries. So interesting times in that area. There we are.
Masood Khoka, University Librarian and Keeper of Bulletin Collection at Leeds. Thank you, Ciaran. That was really insightful. And I'm going opposite Simon. I'm going to ask a very generic question. So given the insights that you've shared and also using your foresight, what advice would you give to RLUK members, individual members, in where do we invest in, given the current situation and circumstances? And then what advice would you give to RLUK as a collective on where we might invest in?
Thanks, Masood. That's a good one.
The outgoing chair is asking what we should spend money on.
I think, I mean, it's hard, yeah, because it feels like it's such a sort of changing, kind of tumultuous time to sort of put a lot of money in a certain direction. I think it's quite a challenging ask. But I think we build on what we're doing already, which is really trying to experiment collectively and learn, because I know you're sort of thinking about the guidance specific around kind of different areas of academia. So yeah, I really think we could probably do more around sharing our experimentation, like sort of Simon picked up, that kind of learning, working together where it makes sense to. But then I also think, you know, our institutions, our libraries are all unique. So I think there are probably areas where we can each kind of go a bit deeper ourselves and then kind of share that learning back. Yeah, not really. I've sort of danced around your question a bit there, but yeah.
We've got time for a couple more questions. We'll go over there next.
Hi, Ciaran. Elizabeth Williams, University of Edinburgh. Really enjoyed that. Fantastic. I just wondered if you could speak a little bit into the ways in which, because it's AI and ideas adoption that you lead on, the ways in which you are drawing upon local communities around the university and particular groups and cohorts. So just thinking about, you know, adoption of good practice in the future. You were talking about coding. So yes, local communities from our future coders working with school children, and then other communities, especially, you know, international ones, from which you can draw, you know, obviously these ideas from. I wondered if you could talk into that piece, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the second part of the job title is I think one I'm still trying to work out the ideas adoption bit. We are at a university level with the AI kind of side. We're trying to create. We're setting up a sort of a team that's going to kind of operate a little bit without the bureaucracy of the rest of the university to maybe do some kind of scalable experiments. Within the library, I'm now interested in how we make that kind of ideas adoption real. So we're trying to push kind of agile out and kind of some of the ideation sort of approaches, I suppose, across the library. In terms of bringing in other communities, I mean, within the university, we're really, really plugged into the kind of, the academic, the teaching and learning space. So we've got a learning development team within the library who have their own student team. We've got about 20 students who are employed. And they are very much a part of sort of the, we're doing like digital skills cafes where people with AI questions can come along. We're trying to centre to the library as the space to come for the AI kind of skills capability piece. In terms of the more the sort of communities of Manchester, I think there's definitely more we can do. So we're really fortunate to be to have the John Rylands Library, which has got some incredible collections. But even more helpfully, we've got the Race Centre, which is based actually in Manchester Central Library, but is attached to us. So I think, yeah, looking forward, there's probably a lot more we can do with perhaps some of those communities that are sort of on our doorstep, because we are literally next to some quite deprived communities who I think would have interesting things to say, and it will be a really interesting conversation to kind of bring them into the loop.
Thank you. Really great question, really important question as well. Next one over there.
Thanks. James Anthony Edwards, University Library at Exeter. Ciaran, you've just talked about centering the human. I want to ask about centering the AI, because there are a lot of tasks, particularly involving pattern recognition, where AI does it not only quicker, but better. So how do we build in that complex message of this, but not this? And how do we factor that into our tool development and, crucially, our deployment of tools, so we're not using people to do things that, frankly, people don't need to do just because we feel they should?
Yeah, I think there's a really long tail behind AI, because like it was described yesterday as this sort of sledgehammer. And sometimes when I'm just going about the workplace and talking to people and realizing what people are doing with Excel and Word and stuff, and think, gosh, I don't think we need to be doing that anymore. And even sort of behind AI, you've got kind of robotic process automation, you've got things like Power Automate. I think there's a really long tail of sort of skills, capabilities, intervention that we can do. In terms of getting some of the kind of AI capability in front of people, something we're thinking about is we've got Manchester Digital Collections, which is sort of our flagship collections platform built on Cambridge's technology. And we want to build some of the tools, sort of image recognition and image compare into those. And I think that would be quite a good way of putting that out into the sort of the research and student community. So, yeah, I think there's a lot we can do, but at sort of different intervention levels.
Got time for just probably 2 more questions if they're fairly short ones. Oh, sorry, I was looking away to the left too long. All right.
Thanks, Katie, on the other side of the room. Wendy White, Director of Library and Learning Services at the University of Southampton. As Research Libraries UK, we're in institutions that are very rich in terms of our research potential, and there's a lot of active research going on at the moment around the AI space, both in terms of the sort of social aspects, the trusted AI environment, but also in terms of the tech side of things. Do you feel as though there are priority opportunities for libraries to be working in partnership with our research communities in some of these areas of research exploration? And do you perhaps have some examples from Manchester or more broadly globally?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at Manchester, we're fortunate to have a kind of a research institute that's a collaboration between academic community and the library. And I think we're trying to pitch for some money that would fund some of this kind of machine learning AI-based research. So, I mean, I think something I've been chatting to my team about is I think we need to get better in this kind of challenging kind of financial situation at working with academics to bid for money. I don't think we've always been very good at that. I think we've also not quite always got the balance of kind of us investigating to then open up, show the possibilities of what's possible with our collections versus just working on a particular person's quite specific piece of research. So I think that's, some of the bits we're looking at is get better at getting money, getting that balance right. And in terms of who's doing good stuff, I mean, Edinburgh's obviously got their own language model. The University of Michigan have got their own AI stuff. There's an awful lot going on. I did start to collate it in a spreadsheet somewhere, but I can find it and share it.
Thank you. Over there, and then we'll take one more from this side, and then that's going to go amber and red, and I'm going to be in trouble. So over there.
Yes, I just wanted to draw attention to what you were saying before about moving from search to answers. And I think that's been one of my key areas of concern, because I think that increasingly, when we pick up our mobile phone, what we get is an answer to a question as opposed to the sources that we might interrogate to understand the question and try to come to a decision. And I think within the context of truth that we're talking about and integrity of information, I'm concerned about the challenges that presents for researchers, students, global citizenship. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of a lot of people are using these tools, these large language models, but they are built sort of out of this kind of Silicon Valley kind of neoliberal kind of ethos. So it's very white, male dominated. And so these answers are filtered through all of those biases. And so it's the very information you're using has been put through that sort of reflection of that very small part of the world. And I think it's a challenge. It's not ideal, but we've kind of got to work with the people that are coming into our spaces who are using these tools already. So I think our role again is making sure that they've got the kind of the critical skills to think about, okay, if I am using this to find answers for my study, for my research, what do I need to be thinking about, and where else do I need to be looking to validate what I'm actually doing? But I think it's I don't know what the answer is to that one. I think that's just an ongoing challenge.
Thank you. One more quick question over here, and then it's time for coffee.
Thank you, Ciaran. David Brown from the University of York. I'm interested in where AI intersects with the research process. And we're seeing, and I think we'll continue to see, lots of tools which claim to speed up that process or even to replace it in some instances. So we're in a situation where a researcher could use one tool or many to find their resources, to summarize them, to synthesize them, and to write the thing that they're doing. In that kind of a landscape, what is the positive message that we as information professionals can put across when they're being promised the world, but we're trying to tell them that maybe those promises aren't quite what they seem? How do we put that across in a really positive and affirming kind of way?
And in 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Yeah.
Easy question.
We need to avoid the disintermediation of the library. So we need to get involved in those conversations and make sure we're kind of putting forward the services that we offer as information professionals, as librarians. Yeah, but it is going to be a challenge because they are going to become cheaper, more appealing. The financial situation is tight. It's going to be a real ongoing challenge, I think, for libraries. We've got to advocate for ourselves, be the human in the loop, and crack on.